Everybody, please welcome Alan Chubb, founder of Quoins Organic Vineyard.
Well, hi there. Nice to be here. And that's the logo that we used for the to the vineyard. That was found. I'm based just outside Bradford-on-Avon, and the day that we were planting, I was cycling up to the sites of the vineyard, and I noticed in the school play yard, the playground, that there were big excavations going on. So I went over to ask, and they said, "We've just found a Roman villa." And this is the logo they found in a Roman villa. So anyway, it's a little bit of background. I got into organic farming because most of my working life had been overseas, working with smallholders, as well as most recently converting a cattle estate to citrus production. That was about 3,000 hectares. So we got rid of the cows and brought in citrus, and we converted a third of that to organic production. And that's what really convinced me that there's nothing clever about organic, it works. So when I started, there were about 500 vineyards in the UK, about 700 hectares, mostly retired old colonels wanting to do a little bit. And now we've moved into being quite an established national organisation. There's 763 vineyards, 164 wineries, 3,500 hectares of vines. They're mostly in the southeast, but there's also quite a lot in Wales even. Mostly it's planted for to sparkling wines, although I only produce still wines. Now that's an aerial photograph of the vineyard. If you look to the top left, you can see a couple of tennis courts and a patch of land. That used to be a vineyard. I don't live here, I hasten to add. I live in Bradford itself. But they had a vineyard, and that's where I learnt. When I came back from abroad, I did a deal with the man who owned it and said, "Look, I'll run it for you. You show me what to do, and we'll split the crop." And once I realised it was a going concern, I bought this piece of land adjoining. There's 3 varieties. Bottom right, slightly fluffy, more coloured. That's the Madeleine Angevin. Then in the middle, there's one called Rondo, which is a red. And then there's the top left is you can see Orion, which is another white. And we make a rosé from the Rondo, where you squeeze it and you don't let it sit on the skins, and you take it out and you produce a rosé with it. It's been organic since the beginning. This was just a field attached to the rest of the farm, and we planted all the hedge, the vines, of course, and we've also got a range of fruit trees, nut trees, apples, plums, pears, chestnuts, hazelnuts. Everything we planted had to be edible. That was the idea. The other issue was where to sell everything, and you don't really think about that until you've actually got something to sell. And being a farmer, you know how to grow it, but you have to learn a whole new exercise in actually going out and selling it. So very nicely, Waitrose stepped forward. So I supply Waitrose in the area. Up in Westbury-on-Trym, they stock it. Nailsea, Weston-super-Mare, Portishead, Warminster, Melksham, and that's about it. Keynsham did as well. but we go to local markets, and there's one thing with wine, it keeps, and it improves with age. We do tour groups, hen parties, very popular, Bath being the hen party capital of Britain. We got a nice little hub going out there. That picnic was supplied by a local food shop, farm food shop, who supply the wine. I can see a glass of my red wine in front, a rosé wine there. Now, part of the wine GB is the main industry basis, and they're just instigating a sustainability organisation part. Now, I'm a bit ambivalent about this because it confuses the customer about what's organic and what's sustainable. And organic is 100% no chemicals. Sustainable, well, you ask for permission and you get to use Roundup, although I might be doing a disservice. We have soil, we look after the microflora in the soil, clover herb mix, and we, the clovers, we get some nitrogen from it. So we've never added any herbicides. We use sulfur as a fungicide against mildew, and seaweed mix as a little extra boost. And we have our own comfrey plot where we make our own comfrey liquid, which is a potassium rich, and a bit of nitrogen, a bit of phosphorus. Part of the Wine GB sustainability initiative is a carbon calculator, of which I signed up to, and I'm actually neutral as I speak. Fuels I use, I've included this in my car fuels because I have to use the car for distributing, although I use couriers as well. So the fuels knock up 2 tons I use of carbon. Materials, down all. Other crops that is 1.5. That's all. This is all output. And then in sequestration is the hedgerow that we've got, and that's all the way around the 1 hectare plot that we have. The perennial crops, i.e. the vines, that's 1.8 tons, and the woodland we have in the tree, we have a little bit of woodland we planted, plus the fruit trees, adds another 1.5. So in the end, it works out basically neutral. I have to cut back on my fuels, that's the answer. But this is a trouble in marketing.
Alan, did you want me to show that PDF you sent me?
Yes, if you whatever you've got there.
I've got it. Yes. So if I go here and then up here. So this, you said page 2, was it? Was the particularly relevant bit? Is that, oh, I see. Okay, I can't share the PDF. I'm sorry. I really thought that would work. That's fine.
The other thing I was just was quite proud of was when I took the land over. As I said, it was a corner of a potato field actually, and I took a soil sample, of course. You take a soil sample every 3-4 years just to see how you're going. And last May, I took another sample, and it's basically, well, the phosphorus has dropped a little bit, but it's still reasonable. Potassium is good levels. Magnesium was not that good when I took it over, but it's now very good. The organic matter, now I'll just read out. The organic matter is above average and is making a positive contribution to soil structure, nutrient retention, water holding and microbial activity. In addition, this level of organic matter is reducing soil erosion risk. Microbial conversion of organic matter will be making a significant contribution to nitrogen and phosphorus availability. The soil is now classified as organic rather than mineral. So that's what happens when you go organic. And I haven't mentioned all the way through here, I'm also biodynamic. So I do apply, it's the comfrey, the horn manure and the horn silica. That's really to boost the microflora in the whole atmosphere in the soil and on the leaves. Right, I think that's my 10 minutes, is it? I can go on ad nauseum.
No, that's great, Alan. Thank you. And yeah, I'm sorry, everybody. I have these. Alan sent me a PDF where it shows sort of the amount of carbon that he's sequestered in various.
Well, I've spoken through that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But it would have been great to show it. But I'm learning right now that when you screen share on Zoom, you can't apparently screen share a web browser. So yeah, that is a shame that I can't show you that. It also means I'm not going to be able to show the video later, and it means I'm not going to be able to show Nick's slides. So Nick, unless you've got them in another format that you can share, where I can make you host and you can do it, all I've got them as is a PDF. Let me unmute you.
Yes, so I have got them as a PowerPoint here. So
okay then. So what I'll do is I'll just make you the host for a moment, and hopefully no one will try and join the meeting while you're talking, and so you won't get any notifications saying that you need to approve them or anything. I think by now everyone's joined who was going to. Just something I should have said before introducing Alan. The reason we really wanted to get Alan on is not only because Nicky's a huge fan of his wine, but basically when we talk about decarbonising our food, we often forget about drink. You know, it's so easy to make sure you've got a lovely plate of lovely organic vegetables and then get a wine from New Zealand or something. You know, we shouldn't forget that a drink, be it wines from far-flung parts of the country, world rather, or juices that have been imported from other parts of the world, or anything else, these all come with air miles and all of the other sorts of things. So yeah, thank you for talking a bit about that, Alan. Our next speaker is Nick Saltmarsh. He is the managing director at Hodmedod's. He's got a lovely poster just behind him, which I'm sure you'll see in a minute. And the reason we wanted to get Hodmedod's on, we wanted to get Nick on, is basically because, as I said at the beginning, lots of us have understood this idea we need to cut down on the amount of meat and dairy we consume. So a lot of us still cling to this idea that we must have some sort of protein in our meal. There has to be a protein or it doesn't feel like a proper meal. And what Hodmedod's are doing, which is really exciting, which I'm sure Nick's going to talk about in more detail, is they are making British grown organic pulses, beans, and basically vegetable-based sources of protein. And so if that is something that you think is very important, but you want to get it organic and British, Hodmedod's is an option. So Nick, you are now the host of the meeting. If you want to try sharing your slides and yeah, take it away.
great, thanks Dorian. I will see if this is going to work.
Perfect.
Okay, just yeah. Okay, so hopefully you can all see the first slide. So yes, thanks very much for the introduction, Dorian. As introduced, I'm Nick, and I'm one of the 3 founders and directors of Hodmedod. And we work with British farmers to offer, well, when we started it was just pulses, but we now offer quite a wide range of foods that all come from British arable farming. So that's pulses, grains, seeds, and other foods that we produce from those crops. So I'll talk you through the history of our business. And we're, as this title screen says, what we do can really be summed up as growing diversity, both in farming, looking at increasing the range of crops that are grown on British farms and can be grown on British farms. And that in itself brings huge benefits in terms of farming and reducing the number of inputs and making farming more sustainable and resilient. But by doing that, we also aim to increase the diversity of British food. So our diets can be varied, and by being varied can be very healthy and nutritious, and that we can get a very varied diet in large part from British agriculture. So our business started in 2012, and it grew out of a community project. Myself and my two co-founders of Hobmadod, we were working for an organisation called East Anglia Food Link, which supported and developed local and sustainable farming in the east of England. And I'm speaking to you from our base in Suffolk, although, as it happens, I myself am also a resident of Bristol. So we were approached by a community group in Norwich, the Transition Town Group, and what they wanted us to do was to look at the most sustainable and resilient diet possible that could be entirely or provided to the largest extent possible from the agricultural hinterland of Norwich. So Norwich is right in the middle of Norfolk, which is a very rich agricultural county, and yet what this group could see was that very little of the food available to them was actually grown around the city of Norwich, and they wanted us to look at what a diet would look like if it was provided by farms as close to the city as possible. And we very quickly realised that the most effective change that could be made would be to move from relying on animal proteins to largely or entirely plant-based proteins. And that by doing this, you could reduce the total amount of land required to feed a city like Norwich. And just by reducing the land use, you're having a huge impact on the negative effects of farming to provide the food on climate change. But also by moving away from animal production, livestock production, you're intrinsically producing food that gram per gram and per gram of protein has a much lower impact on the climate and is much more sustainable in other terms, in terms of biodiversity as well. So if we were going to encourage this shift in diet, we'd need to find a source of vegetable protein that could be produced locally to Norwich. And we sort of scratched our heads and we thought about whether lentils or chickpeas or different types of beans like borlotti beans or navy beans that are used to make baked beans might be produced on Norfolk farms. And then we suddenly had the blinding realization that there was already a bean, the fava bean, that was widely grown across Norfolk and across the country, across Britain more generally, but just didn't feature in our diets at all. And initially we thought that must be because the beans were disgusting, they weren't good to eat, why else would we grow them and not eat them? But when we looked into it, we realized that these beans weren't just being grown to feed to livestock, which is one of the main uses of them. They were also being grown to send abroad to countries like Egypt and other countries in North Africa and the Middle East, where these beans are hugely appreciated and a central part of the diet, eaten daily in dishes like full madam and falafel. And they are a major source of protein for those countries. And if you look back into British history, they were in fact a major source of protein for us until, as we grew wealthier and agriculture became more productive, we were able to bring more of the feast foods, meat and dairy products that we would have occasionally feasted on in the past while relying on beans as our main source of protein. We replaced the beans with meat and dairy as our main source of protein. So we used to eat these beans. They've been grown here for thousands of years. We've just they've fallen out of favour. So I'm just trying to move through my slides. So we did a little project to see if people would like to eat these beans. We packed them up and gave them to people to try and asked for their feedback. And we got an amazing response that everyone who tried them, or almost everyone, said they really liked them. They were also astonished that these beans were being grown locally and they just didn't realise they existed. And that is what prompted us to start Hobmadod, to really continue to work to get these beans that were being grown in Britain back into British kitchens. And in fact, initially the beans we started with weren't organic because we were working with beans that were being grown for livestock feed or for export to Egypt, and we were just buying from farmers already growing them and then getting them into British shops and thereby into British kitchens. But we have, over the years, got organic production up and running, so we now offer British grown organic fava beans. And we quickly realised there was a wider range of pulse crops. And in this slide, you can see the different pulses that were already being grown in Britain, but for the most part just weren't finding their way into our kitchens. So in the top right, you've got split and whole fava beans, and then the other jars that you see there are different kinds of pea, some of them both in their whole and their split form, because pulses, which are the dried seeds of leguminous plants, come in their most basic form as a whole pea or a whole bean, the seed of the plant, but they are often split, which means taking the skin off, and then the seed naturally splits in half, and that means you can cook them in very different ways. So with the fava beans, the whole ones are ideal for ful madame, for example. That's the Egyptian spicy bean stew, but the split ones, when you cook them, cook down and get very soft, so they're ideal for making something like a dal or a hummus alternative, or you can use them to make falafel. And other pulses, like peas, can also be used whole and split. And because they're leguminous, pulses also have the fantastic environmental benefits that the plants are nitrogen fixing. So unlike all other crops which need nitrogen to grow, which has to be applied either in the form of sort of natural fertilizer, often animal manure or compost, or more often in conventional farming, artificial fertilizer, which is a hugely energy intensive product to produce. So the use of artificial nitrogen is a major contributor to carbon emissions. Pulses fix their own nitrogen. They work in symbiosis with bacteria that live in nodules on their roots, and they're able to take that nitrogen themselves from the atmosphere, put it into the soil so they can use it for their fertility, but they also leave a residue of nitrogen that the following crop in a rotation will benefit from. So not only do pulses not need any artificial fertilizer, they also reduce the fertilizer needed for the crop that follows them. So hugely beneficial. I'm aware that time is passing and I can talk endlessly about pulses and things, so I'll try and move on through the rest of my slides swiftly. So having started Holmedod with those basic whole and split pulses, we started to look at other things you could do with them. And we realized that you can mill them to produce some fantastic versatile flour that, like the pulses, is also very high in protein, about 20 to 25% protein, also very high in fiber. And in fact, fiber is probably more nutritionally important to us than protein. In the West, nobody is short of protein. So people worry about protein, but they just don't need to. What we are short of in our diets is fiber, and a lot of the non-communicable diseases that we suffer from as a developed country are the result of not having enough fiber in our diets, and pulses are a fantastic source of fiber as well as protein. So this is a picture of some fava bean flour, which can be used in a very similar way to ground flour, fantastic for making sort of dosas or pancakes or batters, makes an absolutely brilliant white sauce. You can also use it in pastry and baking. We also realized, inspired by Spanish habas fritas, that you can roast British fava beans and produce a ready-to-eat snack. These are our roasted beans. And you can even ferment them. So this is just a very simple, what we call lumpy liquor, which is a fermented cooked fava bean, fermented in just the same way as a miso or a soy sauce or tamari, but using fava beans instead of soybeans as the starting point. And we take this lumpy liquor and then puree it to produce a fava bean umami paste that adds an amazing richness of flavour to any dish you put it in. And because we were now working with farmers, and we were also, as I've said, developing organic production, but also talking to farmers about other crops and realising that, having discovered the pulses that were already being grown here, there were other crops that were being grown here but not finding their way into our kitchens. And this is a picture of a crop of quinoa being grown in Essex, and Peter Fairs, who grows it, had been growing quinoa for 30 years, but just for birds, not for people. And we went to see Peter and talked to him and worked out that he could actually select from his crops a really good quinoa that was excellent for human consumption. So we added quinoa to our range. We also looked at some historic crops. This one is naked barley. So this is barley that, instead of having the husk tightly adhered to it, the husk naturally falls off so you can eat the whole grain, whereas modern barleys are really bred purely for use in malting, as the the start of beer and other products. But naked barley opens up fantastic opportunities for eating British grown barley grains. I'll speed through these, but this is camelina, which is an old oil crop. It was grown in Britain in Roman times. The Romans used it to produce cooking oil where they couldn't grow olives. It's again a fantastically sustainable crop, brilliant in crop rotations, very undemanding in terms of inputs, and produces a fantastic oil, but also delicious edible seeds. And this is chia. So Peter Fair is the same farmer who was growing the quinoa, has been the first farmer who's managed to get another South American crop, chia, growing in the UK. And then we've been doing some trials with other farmers, having initially dismissed lentils and chickpeas as unrealistic to grow here. We've come back to them, and this is a crop of lentils growing in Hertfordshire, in fact, last year. And we're now working with about half a dozen farmers who are growing lentils for us. And then more recently, we started working with a farmer in Norfolk who's growing chickpeas. This is a picture taken just a couple of weeks ago of this year's chickpea crop forming in its pods. So that's a very quick overview of the crops we work with, and a sort of run through our history as a business, how we've added to our range over the years. By working with the farmers to produce those crops, what we hope to do, as I said at the beginning, is offer a diverse range of foods. And we have a growing collection of recipes on our website that really show different things that you can do with the foods that we produce. And this is just a selection of them. And that's the final slide, just showing a few of our products packed up and ready to go. So thanks very much. I'll transfer the hosting back to Dorian, if I can work out how to do that.
Yeah, if you look at the participants list, I should be hopefully somewhere near the top. And I think if you either right click or hover over me.
Okay.
Yep, perfect.
Yep.
All right, great.
Thanks very much.
That was fantastic. Please, everybody, do, if you have any more questions or anything, stick them in the chat. We'll do all of them at the end once we've heard from all of the different speakers. Okay, so our next speaker is Ruth Gofter, not quite Clifton or Bishopston, Cotham or Redland, but local to our sort of area. And I understand, Ruth, that you are pretty much self-sufficient when it comes to food.
Yes, that's what I'm about 90% on fruit and veg. That's
Great.
Right.
And so if I do this correctly, your slides will come up. And yeah, and so Ruth is going to talk a little bit about how she does that, and how you can probably do more of it than you think. But yes, Ruth, take it away.
Thank you very much, Dorian. Thank you very much for asking me tonight. I'd also like to thank Nick and Alan, because a lot of what you were saying really rang true with me, and I'd like to pick up on some of the themes that you mentioned. I'd like to put a little bit of context on. I am about 90% self-sufficient for fruit and veg. There are things like lemons that I can't grow, obviously, and I don't grow very many roots because I have very thick, heavy clay, but I'm going to be having more raised beds in the next year or so to improve that. So could I have the next slide, please? When Nikki asked me to do this, I felt slightly fraudulent, because I'm thinking, all I do is grow fruit and veg, what's the big deal? And then when I started talking to friends about it, and they all said, Ruth, you are slightly eccentric. We don't know anyone else that grows quite as much for home consumption as you do. So a little bit of context. This is my garden. All the photographs were taken in the last year. And it's a 1920s, 3-bed semi, fairly normal town garden. Very traditional layout with patio, circular lawn surrounded by flower beds. And at the back, there's fruit trees, compost bins, shed, greenhouse, vegetable patch. So fairly normal, and I do grow lots of flowers as well. I don't just grow vegetables, so it's a reasonably small patch, and I really want to talk tonight about what you can do, what's possible, and even just starting small, it's really worth doing. So next slide, please. So you may have seen the lawn had big marks on, and about 5 years ago I realised that there were as many weeds in my lawn as there was grass, and just decided to go with it and to see what came up. And for the last 5 years or so, I've had a wildflower meadow, and I've deliberately mown a path through the middle and around the outside so that the neighbours know it's deliberate and it's not just accidental. Everything has just come by itself except for the cowslips. They're the only thing that I've planted. And every year it's got better and better, and from month to month it changes. And it's not just for the flowers and the beautiful grasses, it's for the insects, the butterflies, the frogs and toads that all live in there, as well as the slugs and snails that are in there as well. But I think you have to take the good with the bad. So next slide, please. Showing you a little bit of the good and the bad. I do have a huge range of different wildlife that comes to the garden, and I do grow organically. I don't use any chemicals at all. And for a long time I was beset with problems with, that everyone has with caterpillars and slugs and snails. And I've come over the years to realise you can't have hedgehogs unless you have slugs and snails. You need the caterpillars if you're going to have butterflies. And so, if you want ladybirds, you've got to have something for them to eat as well. And it's that balance that, where I want to deter them, I will. So, for example, you can see there, I have slug collars around very young plants. So the plastic collars with the copper on. But then, when they get bigger, they've got to fend for themselves, and hopefully by then they'll be strong enough. But the wildlife brings me huge pleasure, as well as being necessary for growing organically. I need the bees, I need the pollinators, and it brings me a huge amount of pleasure to see all the different things arriving and increasing year on year. And it really makes me think about what some of these things are and learn. So the next slide is a really key point. I'm not going to list all the different fruit and veg that I grow, but one thing I really want to say is you've got to think through the whole year, and a good year and a bad year. So North Somerset, awful lot of rain. But also, as you all know, we have a hungry gap in the spring when the winter vegetables have stopped, but you haven't got any of your summer veg coming through. So perennial vegetables, I'd make a big plea for perennial vegetables. So sorrel and artichokes here, for example, they don't produce a huge amount, but you really need them in sort of April, May when you don't have much else. But also to think through what you need in the winter. So having the pumpkins and the squashes is really beneficial. And here you can see a climbing trombone courgette. And I originally started growing them because I got fed up with the slugs and snails eating my courgette plants and the courgettes. And I thought if I grew them climbing, it might help. But then you can also keep them as the skins harden, and they're good to eat in the winter as well. But I also want to make a point about growing a variety, because every year you'll have different weather conditions, and sometimes it'll be great for one thing but not so good for another, and next year it'll be something different again. So for example, the top right hand, I've got 4 different kinds of kale growing, and they've got pretty leaves. It's great to look at, but it's also, I know perfectly well they won't all have a good year this year. And it's really helpful to have a body. So to share the seeds, to share the growing of the seedlings, to share crops. Last year I had a really bad courgette year, but other friends didn't, and we constantly share produce and seeds, and that's really, really helpful. You don't feel alone that way. Okay, next slide, please. Ten years ago, I set up Transition Clifton, and very soon I decided to do a food challenge. And I only ate and drank local produce from a 50-mile radius. And so it was great to hear about local wine, because after 3 weeks of drinking cider, I searched for Somerset wine online, and I did find quite a few vineyards, which was lovely. But realising that Somerset doesn't produce that much food, and I didn't visit a supermarket for a whole month, made me think about what can I do to really increase the variety of things I grow, and to extend the season. So the very next year I got a greenhouse, and I can grow things like, as you can see, peppers, aubergines, cucumbers, chilies, tomatoes. This year I have 20 tomato plants, not all in the greenhouse, and 10 varieties. And it means that I never ever buy these things, because if they're in season, I've got them, and if they're not in season, I wouldn't be buying them because they'd be imported or grown in a heated greenhouse somewhere. So friends do find that really weird, that I never ever buy tomatoes or cucumber. I just enjoy what I've got myself. So next slide, please, Dory. So this is some of the fruit I grow. I have fresh fruit all the year round, and I also freeze a lot. It's a mixture of hard fruit and the soft fruit, but it is great to be able to go outside and get fresh fruit for breakfast. Although I do freeze some, I've only got a normal standard fridge freezer. It's only got 2.5 drawers in, and that has to be that has to get all my surplus, the gluts for the fruit and the vegetables. But I have found that if I have more freezer space than that, I'm not eating the things in the garden. So I think it's very doable, it's very feasible, and I would really recommend that people think about it. Next slide. I was really interested to hear what you're both saying about the importance of soil, because that is crucial if you're growing organically. And so, yes, I grow green manure, so there's mustard there. I also have comfrey. I make liquid fertilizers from nettles. Soil, the crop rotation is really important. So yes, I'm really careful with my beans and my legumes, as Nick was saying, great for nitrogen. Garden compost, I do put manure in, seaweed, and also the green manures are wonderful for pollinators if you let them flower, and you really want to encourage pollinators. So I have a worry hive, which is the middle slide, which is a hive if you're keeping bees naturally. So I keep bees purely as pollinators because bees are in decline, and I don't take the honey unless the hive, the colony dies. So next slide, please. This is to look at companion planting. I grow nasturtiums, comfrey, marigolds, so partly to deter pests, but also to encourage the good insects in. So nasturtiums, for example, can be eaten by caterpillars, and the marigolds deter whitefly and greenfly in the greenhouse, and borage also attracts blackfly and attracts pollinators. I make a real plea for dandelions. A lot of my friends, I think I'm really eccentric at this point. I actually grow dandelions. I'm the only person that I know that grows them deliberately. They are very early, they're perennial, and like a lot of perennial plants, they are very nutritious because of that. They're also earlier in the season. And so dandelions will attract pollinators, and they're really important as one of the first foods in spring for bees. But also after that, cut the leaves. I use the leaves as a harvest. I use it to mulch it. They're very nutritious, and I put them in the compost heap. And I love my dandelions. Okay, next please. So it's all very well growing all these things, but it's really important to be eating them. And Nick might see I've got at least 3 kinds of dried beans there: pea beans, and then a runner bean which produces white butter beans, and then a French bean that produces black beans. So I do eat food fresh, but I also preserve a huge amount. So the normal jams, chutneys, jellies, and I freeze things, dry things. The roast tomatoes, I grow a huge amount of tomatoes. I roast them and freeze them, and then I never have to buy tin tomatoes or tomato puree or anything in the winter. So, and I've got flowers there because flowers are also a crop, and they're great for my mental health. And so doing a bit of Japanese ikebana is great for my mental health as well as my physical health, being out in the garden. So my dad saw these slides yesterday, and he said, it's a bit daunting, intimidating for people to show them you've done all of this. I'm still learning. I'd love to learn from you as well. I'm sure you've got some great ideas and experience out there. And every year I produce more and more and more I can share with friends and family. There are huge benefits, mental and physical health, giving to friends and family. In March this year, when the garden centres closed, I was able to pass on 120, 130 tomato plants to friends and neighbours, for example, never mind lots of other things as well. So there's a great amount of community sharing and community building as well that you can be doing if you grow your own fruit and veg. So thank you very much. It's worth doing. Start small and you'll get a lot out of it.
I thought there was more than that. That's fantastic, Ruth. Thank you very much for that. I know that now that we've had 3 speakers, some people are going to start leaving. So I just want to give a very quick plug to the better food options on both cliftonclimateaction.org and bcrenergygroup.org. If you want to learn more about all of the things we talked about tonight, that's probably the best place to look for it. And do also join the mailing list and like us on Facebook and donate cash at paypal.me/Clifton Climate Action. But we will get to questions in a second. But I also really want to bring in Rhiannon Price-Owen, if that's all right with you, Rhiannon, because Rhiannon also grows some of her own food, but she has an even smaller garden than Ruth. So I'm going to unmute you, Rhiannon. I'm going to leave this slide up. Yes, I'm not going to try and find the picture you sent me, but why isn't this unmuting you? Why isn't that unmuting you? Okay, I'm going to take that away for a second. I feel like Rhiannon is talking, we can't hear her. Okay. I don't know why that is. Oh, hey.
You can hear me now?
There
okay.
Yeah. All right. So yes.
Yes, I moved from a 3-bedroom small house with a garden to an retirement apartment with a balcony. And I did used to love my gardening and my 3 bees garden, birds, bees and butterflies. And now I had a balcony which is 16 foot wide and very narrow, 2 foot wide. So so I started growing flowers with boxes. So, and I've got a rail which I can hang the boxes on, and so that was great, and I enjoyed that, and that was attracting the bees and the butterflies. But then I was thinking, with a balcony, everything on the lower level is dark. So I thought, oh, these plants need height and light. So I bought 2 shelving units, and with 4 shelves on, which I put either end of the balcony. And then I also had another shelving unit from the French doors that I come out of opposite. So I started putting window boxes on that. But then I thought, oh, I could put my herbs on these, you see. So I then started growing herbs, which I missed very much, not being able to pick my herbs. So I started planting herbs in the sort of window boxes, and then putting them in the lower shelving units. So I've got bay leaves, thyme, mint, sage, and they grew really well. And it's the south facing; it gets the sun all day, and the wall is very warm, so the plants grew brilliantly. So so I sort of carried on with this and thought, this year a friend of mine gave me some tomato plants. So the herbs are doing really well, and so I started growing these vine tomatoes, and I've actually got some tomatoes which have come to fruition. So I'm really pleased about that. So gradually, I like keeping the flowers because that's part. I love of gardening as well, and that attracts the butterflies and the bees. But also, I'm going to sort of explore more. The herbs are doing really well, and then I've got my tomatoes. So now on the shelving unit, I'm going to start thinking about the salads that I can grow, and then aubergines as well, which I used to grow in my porch in the last places I lived, and also peppers. And I was thinking as you were talking about the peas, and I thought, oh, I could put some, I could train some peas up by the wall, you see. So I was thinking I might start that as well. So it's only a small space, but it gives me a huge amount of pleasure. It also attracts the bees and the butterflies. And I think you can, if you've got a bit of space and get a bit of soil in a container, I think you can grow anything anywhere, and it gives you a huge amount of pleasure. And the problems, the difficulties you have, what I do now though, I do have a sort of almost like a crop rotation. So I have boxes on the outside, and then when they die back, I then bring them in, and then I bring the window boxes that are on the inside out, and gradually the sort of it is like a rotation of window boxes. So when the season passes, then a new crop comes through. So I have to think that through. And the other thing with balconies, it's a sheltered balcony, it's the water. You have to keep the soil moist, and watering is really essential. We have a great gardener who looks after the community grounds, and we share compost, so I can renew some of the boxes with, I give her compost, the old compost, and then she sort of puts it in the main compost container, and then I pinch a bit more for my window boxes. So that's a bit of a partnership with our gardener, but it works really well, and it gives me a huge amount of pleasure, and it's that principle of, if you've got a space, you can grow something.
That's fantastic. Caroline Pitt, did you want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing? Because Rhiannon's doing what she's doing with nothing more than a balcony.
Have you got my photo?
See
that? It doesn't work. Oh, it does sort of.
She's growing them in her window. If you can't make
out. Basically, you know, with application in Clifton, I've got south-facing windows in a very deep window reveal with shutters. And so what I've done is sort of like, you know, the Amsterdam thing, where I've just completely filled that window with wire shelving, and I put all my seedlings on that. So it was sort of like, you know, instead of a greenhouse, I've got a south-facing window with the metal shelving in, and that was all the seedlings before I took them to the allotment. So starting from about March till July, it had little tiny vegetable plants in it. That was it.
Nice. Okay, yeah, no, so I bring those two in, though. Caroline and Rhiannon are both Clifton Climate Action volunteers, I suppose. Just to kind of say, I know if I were in the audience listening to Ruth's talk, I thought, oh, that's very impressive and it sounds wonderful, but there's no way I could possibly do that. But when I mentioned it to Rhiannon and Caroline, they both went, oh, I do it in my tiny little Clifton flat. I think my flat is slightly tinier than yours. This isn't it, by the way, I'm at Nikki's place. But I've got a windowsill, and who knows what I might try and grow on there next summer. So yes, you've inspired me, everybody. But okay, let's get to some questions. If anyone else has got any more questions, stick them in the group chat. I'm going to try and start from the top if the technology will allow. So this is one, I think this was asked of Alan during your talk, Alan. But I guess if anyone else wants to come in on it, it's a practical one about getting soil analysed. How do you know the content of your soil?
You have to pay big money, 50 quid, to as people called NRI, NRM, sorry. They're over in Oxford. You have to go around your field taking soil analyses. So you dig with a spade, you dig down a foot or so, and then take a range of samples across the field. Mix it all up and send it off to them. And
how
they come back
how often do you do that? How often do you get your soil analysed?
So once every 3 years, that sort of thing. It's really, you're monitoring the change. It's when you start, which is the important thing.
So the next thing in the group chat is not strictly a question, but I'll read it out anyway because I like you, Grant. Hodmadod's fava beans, carlin peas, split pea, green split peas, and some savoury snacks made from these can be found at smaller footprints in Clifton Village. We're a big fan of Clifton. I'm a big fan of Clifton Village. I live there, but I'm a big fan of smaller footprints as a zero waste shop. And Grant is one of our trustees, committee members, I suppose. So those products available all sorts of different places. Which beans for drying would you recommend for an allotment? Nick, I don't know if you want to try and take that one. If that was Caroline, Nick, what sort of beans do you think Caroline could grow in her allotment / window boxes?
So Ruth showed us some fantastic beans that she grows, and I would recommend any of those sorts of beans really as a good starting point. The Phaseolus families, which we think of as French beans or runner beans, Phaseolus vulgaris and Phaseolus coccineum. But as well as being fantastic to eat when the pods are immature and green, and that's how we most commonly eat them in this country, if you just leave them to grow on and ripen and mature, you can then pick the dried pods and the dried beans inside. You can air dry them a little further if needed, and then they'll store through the year and even beyond. And In fact, if I had to pick just one, I would say those white-seeded runner beans are, I think, the most superb bean. You know, we don't think of runner beans as something you eat dry, but any dry runner bean is absolutely delicious. And the white ones, I think, Emergo and Zara are two of the most common varieties, are really superb. And you can grow them on any size plot. You can enjoy some of the fresh runner beans, and then you can leave some of them just to go over and fully mature, and then pick them dry at the end of the season. So, yeah, that's
great.
That's
fantastic, Nick. Thank you. Ruth, did you want to? You were nodding along with a lot of what Nick was saying. Did you want to comment on growing beans in an allotment?
I would echo what Nick said. They're very, very easy to dry. I leave it till the end of the season. Otherwise, if you leave it too early, then you don't get this succession of crops. So leave it till the end of the season, take the ones that are drying, and I just put them on the windowsill, and when the pods are really dry and crunchy, just take them out of the pods, and it's great fun to eat them in the winter knowing that you were growing them last summer.
Great. Another one for Nick about Hodmedods from Nikki. She's interested to know how easy it was for you to get initial investment for Hodmedods. It's kind of an interesting idea. How did you go about doing that?
Yes, so we essentially started on a shoestring. We put in a bit of our own money to start the business, and we took out some loans from the bank and from other lenders. And then we've grown the business largely organically by reinvesting, you know, as we've grown over the last 8 years. We are currently, in fact, looking at some crowdfunding options to possibly get some more investment into the business so we can do more and sort of do more faster. We've also benefited from huge support from the farmers who grow for us in the terms that they give us, and how they've been really ready to share risk and work collaboratively with us on what we've been trying to do. So yeah, it's been that sort of mix.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I think I'm not sure who exactly this question was for, but what is the definition of a biodynamic? Would that have been for Nick? Or
I think it's for Alan, because he mentioned that his vineyard is biodynamic.
Ah.
I'm biodynamic.
Go on then, talk about biodynamics, please.
Okay. It's about getting this, starting with the soil, the atmosphere, the environment in balance. As soon as you put an artificial chemical in your field, you totally disrupt the balance of all the microflora, the bacteria, the fungi, the natural microflora that exists in the soil. So if you take a cube of soil, a cubic inch of soil, that's got thousands and thousands of microorganisms in it. And they're all fighting each other, if you like, all eating each other until they get to a balance. And then that works quite well because the nutrition status of that soil is in balance with itself. As soon as you put chemical in, that totally disrupts it, and you get these wars go on amongst all the microflora. So that's the basic concept, that you're keeping things in balance. It's sustainable. You're not disrupting the natural cycles of nature. And the concept of horn manure, it goes back to Steiner in 1910 or something, where he instigated all this approach, that you take a cow horn, stuff it full of manure, mix with your local soil, shove it in the ground, and all this microflora start germinating and fighting and balancing. And then you take that out after 6 months, stir it up in a solution and spray it around the field, and that reintroduces the balance of the microflora. There you go. 2 minutes. Oh, I must say, I got a notice from the biodynamic group. They're based in Stroud. It was a little logo at the end saying, "May all your weeds be wildflowers."
That sounds very poetic. No, very detailed answer. Thank you for that. So Tim asked what the size is of your garden, Ruth, but I think the point we've sort of learned here is that it's not really size that matters. But go on, I'll answer the question if you like.
I'm not entirely sure how big it is. It's 10 fence panels long, so it's probably about 70 metres long, something like that. But most of it isn't vegetables. I'm extending it next year, but most of it is either wildflowers or real flowers.
Great. Okay. So then there was a conversation about whether Quoins wine is stocked anywhere in Bristol. Nikki saying that Waitrose does stock some, but you can just buy direct. She stocked up early in the year, and Alan delivered it personally. So if that sounds appealing to you, I'm sure we can get an email address.
I'll deliver a bulk delivery.
Wow, that's an offer. Who can refuse that? Fantastic.
You can. It's a special deal with Madeleine and the Rondo Red, which I'm drinking at the moment. They both come at £8 each, and if you buy a case, you'll get the special deal.
There you go. Boise wants to point out that dandelion leaves have a very high calcium content also. So I learned that today. Ruth, do you use a dehydrator?
No, I don't have one. I put everything on south-facing windowsills, but it's something I might invest in the future.
Okay. This is an interesting one for Nick. Any prospect, do you think, of British hemp seed?
Absolutely. In fact, as it happens, we have our first delivery of cleaned hemp seed coming in next week. We've found a producer in Sussex who's growing hemp seed to produce a range of different sort of cosmetic and other products. And we've managed to buy some of his hemp seed from him and get it cleaned up so it's good for human consumption, and it's coming in early next week. So we'll be available soon. And yeah, also just say hello to Grant and thanks for all your custom and promoting and supporting us.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I'm just going to ask, what does hemp seed taste like? I think of hemp being used for bags and rope and things.
Yes, it has a very distinctive sort of oily and aromatic flavour. It's something like halfway between a sort of spice and a grain, and you can use it in baking or toast the seeds and eat them on salads and use them in all sorts of different ways. And I've also noticed that Grant was asking about sunflower seeds.
Yes.
Sunflower seeds are more challenging because getting them to fully ripen in our climate is difficult. And we haven't yet found anyone who's growing or up for growing sunflower seeds that would be suitable for human consumption. Obviously, if you're growing them for birds, then the quality doesn't need to be quite so high. But human consumption sunflower seeds are difficult in the British climate.
Sure, okay. And then I think, so Nikki has asked, Ruth, do you have a recipe book for all of your seasonal, do you keep a nerdy recipe book to keep track of all of your seasonal recipes?
Well, I'm glad she asked this. A couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was looking after my own garden and my neighbours were away, and I had something like 3 pounds of courgettes and 10 pounds of runner beans, and thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? And I couldn't give them away fast enough. And in the end, I searched online for courgette recipes, and there were just so many hundreds out there that I realised the problem wasn't the courgettes or the runner beans, it was me not being creative enough. So I started collecting all the recipes in files. So I have a courgette file, I have the bean file, I have, all the different things I could have a glut of, I have a file. So when I have my broad beans, I have 40, 50 recipes to choose from, and I never get bored of them before I run out of them. And I always wish the season would go on for longer. And I think that's been really helpful in making my diet more varied. And I really look forward to something coming along because I know I'm going to have some great recipes.
Do you have any suggestions for websites or anything in particular that are really helpful for these, or is it just Google it and see what comes up?
Google it and see what comes up, but whenever I see a recipe in a magazine or a book or someone's cooked something for me, I get the recipe so that next year I've got even more inspiration.
Great. Yes, so one person we didn't manage to hear from tonight is a woman called Claire Hargreaves. She's had to leave us already, but she has an Instagram page where she talks about how to use every bit of your food, beetroot leaves, carrot tops, etc. Do you know what it's called?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, we'll try and find out what that's called, and we'll put it on social media and things, because yeah, I'd be interested to know what you can cook with carrot tops and things like that. A question for Nick: do you plan on making any hemp milk? It seems like a better option than almond or soya.
We don't have any immediate plans. I mean, it would be quite a big venture to take on and require quite a lot of investment. But who knows in the future? What we are doing, in fact, we started doing very recently, is working with another producer who grows oats in Cambridgeshire. And they have, in fact, just started making oat milk from the oats that they grow. So we are working with them to sell their oat milk, which is, you know, a great British-grown plant-based milk alternative.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great new. There are several Claire Hargreaves accounts on Instagram, which is the right one. We'll try and find out. Hemp goes great on cereal. Fascinating. And it will be great to have a local crop. Thanks for your answer, Ree Sunflower. And Caroline Pitt recommends Riverford Brook website is good for recipes sorted by vegetable.
About that, sorry to interrupt, the Hugh Ferning written store book on veg, the River Cottage Veg Everyday book, is really good for British seasonal vegetables and has some really lovely inventive recipes in. So if you want to have British vegetables, I'd go for that book.
Okay, great. I think that's the last of the questions in the chat. If anyone else has anything that they're burning to ask before we end, stick it in there now. Otherwise, I'll just sort of wrap up by saying a huge, huge thanks to all of our speakers. Alan Chubb from Quoins, Nick Saltmarsh from Hogmedod's, Ruth from Clifton, and our two local volunteers from Clifton, Rhiannon and Caroline. Thank you for speaking as you did. That was really, really great. Our next event is going to be 2 Thursdays from now. It's going to be how to get Bristol walking and cycling. There's an Eventbrite page and there's a Facebook thing. We're going to have somebody from the Bristol Walking Campaign, Bristol Cycling Campaign and Bristol Walking Alliance, and somebody from Travel West talking about the options they have out there for practical help to get people doing those things, basically. We've got lots of other talks. October is Biodiversity Month, just because. And we've got lots of other exciting things coming up. Please do check out the websites. Please, please, please go and check out the Better Food Options pages on either website, cliftonclimateaction.org or bcrenergygroup.org. There's also one on greener gardening. We talked a lot about gardening tonight, that is where I'm going to post this amazing video that Roxanne, one of our volunteers, has had put together, which I sadly couldn't share with you, but it is great. It's really worth watching, particularly if you do have an allotment or are thinking about getting one. We'll get that on there as soon as we can. Please do donate via the PayPal, paypal.me/CliftonClimateAction. Join the mailing lists. There's too many things to remember, but I believe that's all of them. So yeah, thank you all very much for coming, everybody. I'm going to end the recording now, and you're all free to go and enjoy the rest of your evenings. But yeah, thanks very much. And enjoy a glass of wine. Why not?